Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you for braving the elements to be here today. It's so lovely to see you. And thank you for your support. You know, I remember as a kid growing up on Shabbat. For me, Shabbat was all the things I could not do. And it was boring. It was boring. It was terrible. Couldn't do this, couldn't do that, couldn't do the other. And I never understood my parents. My parents, they thought it was a machaya. Oh, wonderful, they didn't have to do whatever they're busy kite, everything was resting. And I couldn't see it. But then as I grew up, I realized that it wasn't about all the things we can't do on Shabbat, but it's the things that we can do on Shabbat, which are very different than what we do during the week. Shabbat is one of the central features of Judaism. Achad Ha'am, a 20th century philosopher and Zionist, said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. Observing the Shabbat is, of course, one of the 10 Commandments. We have it right there. You see 1, 2, 3, 4 down on the tablets there. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. Observing the Shabbat. That's what it says right there, or remembering. In this week's Torah portion, Ki Tisa, we have a more expanded explanation of our holy day of rest. What does the Torah say? Speak to the Israelite people and say, nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbaths. For this is a sign between me and you throughout the generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who has consecrated you. You shall keep the Shabbat, for it is holy for you. One who profanes it shall surely be put to death. Whoever does work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among the people. 6 days may you work, but on the 7th day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, a day holy to the Lord. And whoever does work on the Shabbat day shall surely be put to death. The Israelite people shall keep the Shabbat, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant of all times. It shall be a sign for all times between me and my people, the people of Israel. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day God ceased from work and was refreshed, was resouled. That's what the Torah tells us. And to emphasize the point that the commandment to observe Shabbat comes directly from God, the next verse tells us that when God finished speaking, God gave Moses the two tablets of stone, the 2 tablets of testimony, written be'etzba Elohim, with the finger of God. So the question we have to ask is, why the 7th day? Why not the 6th day or the 8th day? And how does our religious calendar connect with the modern concept of a 7-day week? Now, in the modern world, the 7-day week is nearly a universal custom. Some religions have liturgical calendars based on different time periods. And some cultures, such as the Javanese, have a different length weeks. But the modern world most definitely is based on the 7-day week, regardless of where in the world you may be found. Now, the earliest known time when a 7-day period was considered significant was actually in ancient Babylonia. Over 4,000 years ago, before even the days of the patriarchs, it was based on dividing the lunar month into 4 7-day periods, which always reset on the beginning of the lunar month. The Jewish calendar is the earliest known reference to a 7-day cycle that continues forever without reference to phases of the moon or other astronomical phenomena. And the writings about Shabbat as the seventh day are found in what the scholars consider to be the oldest layers of the Hebrew Bible, going back nearly 3,000 years. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. The early Romans didn't have a 7-day week. They actually had an 8-day week. And after the Julian calendar was initiated in the year 45 CE, the 7-day week started to replace it. But it wasn't till after Constantine converted to Christianity in the 4th century that gradually the 8-day week died out. And from there, it spread throughout the world. And the days of the week that we use in secular language are based on the planets. Sunday, of course, is the day of the sun. Monday is Moon Day. Saturday being tied to Saturn. The days of the week weren't given their names until the late Roman period. In Judaism, we don't have names for our days. We have numbers. Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Yom Chamishi, etc. We don't have names. Since Christians had continued following the Jewish calendar, the 7th day in their counting was tied to the Sabbath. With Saturday, the Sabbath, and the start of the week was Sunday. Now, the Torah emphasizes the importance of the seventh day. In this week, as Parsha, we're told the penalty for violating Shabbat was death. And in case we think they weren't serious about that, don't make any mistake. The Torah was very serious. In fact, in Bamidbar chapter 15, we're told that someone who went out to gather wood on Shabbat, which is a prohibited activity, was put to death for that infraction. Thank God we don't put people to death for violating the Shabbat anymore. We'd have no Jews left, so we can't do that. But what about the other penalty that the Torah speaks of violating Shabbat? That if someone violates Shabbat, the Torah tells us the soul is cut off from its people. What does it mean? Never understood that. What does it mean that the soul is cut off from its people? Rabbeinu Bachya, drawing on a source in the Mechilta, says it means death bidei shamayim, at the hands of heaven. God will cut the person's life short. In other words, if there are witnesses and there is warning, the official procedure of capital punishment, the person is supposed to be executed. And if there was no witnesses or warnings, God will take care of it. Well, I'm going to tell you something. In my career as a rabbi, as you know, I've done many funerals. And I've done many funerals of octogenarians who I can tell you for sure, and I'm not criticizing, not judging, didn't keep anything, let alone Shabbat. And they still live till 100 plus. So I'm not quite sure what that means, cutting people off from heaven. But there was another rabbi called the Seforno. And he explains it this way. He says, since it says the soul will be cut off from among the people, it means from among people destined to live in the world to come after they die. But you know what? I don't really buy that. I suggest it's better to understand this teaching metaphorically rather than literally. God's not going to cut your life short because you didn't observe Shabbat. And by the way, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that you shouldn't observe Shabbat. To the contrary, I'm advocating you should. But I don't believe for 1 second that God is going to cut your life short because you didn't observe Shabbat. Although it's possible if you're one of those hard-driving type A personalities who doesn't know how to take a day off, that resting on Shabbat could extend your life. That's possible. I don't believe for 1 minute that God will award or deny you a place in the world to come based on how punctilious you were about following the laws of Shabbat. If you neglect Shabbat, God's not going to cut off your soul from the community. You're going to cut off your soul from the community. You're doing it to yourself. You see what's going on here? The Torah is not mandating a punishment, but rather it's telling us what happens. That's why Achad Ha'am said, it's Shabbat that has kept the Jews, kept us as a people, sustained us through good times and bad times. How? Well, we gather as a community on Shabbat. We gather to share meals on Shabbat. We gather together to just sit around and schmooze. During the work week, we're probably too busy to have time to socialize, have time to make time for God. But Shabbat clears our calendars for us and provides us that space. 20 years ago, and you might remember this, 20 years ago, there was a horrific terrorist attack in Tel Aviv. 21 young Israelis, including 16 teenagers, were murdered by a suicide bomber while standing in line to get in the Dolphinarium discotheque in Tel Aviv on Friday night. Most of them were recent immigrants from Russia. And I heard about a remarkable exchange that took place at the Satmar Beit Midrash the following week. One of the young students, all fired up with piety, became God's policeman overnight, exclaimed, "What do they expect? They go dancing in a disco on Shabbos night in Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. It's an invitation to Satan." In other words, he followed that Rabbeinu Bachya, what Rabbeinu Bachya said. They suffered death at the hands of heaven for violating Shabbat. Thank God there was one older man in the Beit HaMedrash at the time, a white-haired chassid who shook his head and he said, no. They all grew up in Russia not knowing anything about Yiddishkeit. They came here and no one taught them a thing about Yiddishkeit. What do they know except to go out dancing on Friday night? For that, the Ribono Shel Olam, the Master of the universe, will forgive them. The question is, will he forgive us for the way we keep Shabbat? After all, we claim to know something about Shabbos. And if we were to sing like they sing at the discotheque, and if we were to dance like they dance in the discotheque, and if we were to rejoice like they rejoice, but round our Shabbos tables in our communities, it would be so powerful that nobody would feel the slightest desire to go out to the disco on Shabbos. So what gives Shabbat its power is community. At its heart, it is not a day for sitting by yourself and praying alone and studying Torah alone. It is a day for being together with your fellow Jews. It's a day of community, a day of sharing food, a day of companionship, and maybe, during all that time, maybe even a little Torah. But if you're not part of the community, in my opinion, you're not really observing Shabbos. So think about it. Think about what Shabbat means to you and how you could make the changes to make it more relevant in your life. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. We're going to continue now on page